Hello, how are you? How are you coping with lockdown? Well, Britain and the world, in fact. I'm Nick Hennigan, Artistic Director and General Factotum for the Maverick Theatre Company. And bearing in mind these are fairly unusual days and lots of people have been doing stuff from home, it was as a result of a conversation, actually a Zoom conversation with TV producer John Lloyd, he of Blackadder and QI and other fantastic things, and the Idler magazine, and a chap who used to work at a local pub I used to go to. Do you remember pubs? Yeah. That I thought I might do this. Maybe a bit indulgent, but it goes back to 1997, or it goes back earlier than that, actually. It goes back to 1992, but I won't bore you with the whole story. But Maverick Theatre was started when I got a little bit drunk one night. Yeah, it's Welsh, by the way. I miss Wales. I miss Birmingham and I miss Wales. I'm in London at the moment. 1992, and I ended up writing a version of Shakespeare's Henry V for one man, which got picked up by Jasper Carrott's management. Jasper was well, he's still a famous Birmingham comedian. Their management company, Star Ward, God bless them, John and Les, took us to the Edinburgh Festival, and it kind of changed my life. We did really well at Edinburgh. Henry V Lion of England toured the world, and in fact he's still touring now and got 5 stars at the Edinburgh Festival just last year again. And that, when I was in Edinburgh, I saw the democracy of theatre, and being from a council estate housing project in Birmingham, kind of realised that the reason no one in Birmingham ever, or sorry, at least no one on our estate ever went to the theatre was no one asked us. And so Maverick was born as a result of that. And the very first production we did, I thought we'd do above a pub because it's fairly easy for people to get to. There's very little pretension about it, and remarkably, as Birmingham is Britain's second city, there was no pub theatre in Birmingham, which I say quite remarkable. So I'm kind of rushing through this a little bit. In 1992, when we first started, we were after people like me who didn't go to the theatre. So it was a different proposition. We weren't doing sort of theatrical things. We were advertising in pubs and chip shops, and we were doing a fairly accessible first season of plays. And I wrote a newsletter. And in this newsletter, which we handed out to pubs, this is kind of 1993, 94, internet. And so on this newsletter, I wrote a little journal, little diary about the setting up of Maverick, and it went really, really well. So in 1997, I wrote another play called A Ghost of a Chance, which I'll tell you about as we go. And again, due to sort of demand, people saying you should do another diary, I thought what I'd do is I would keep a stream of consciousness almost, rather than a diary, of the making of this new play, A Ghost of a Chance. It was interesting to do, partly because we won an award through the National Theatre, the Royal National Theatre, darling, don't you know, through the Guinness Award. We won a Guinness Award, which meant we got some money to put this show on. I wanted Paul Henry, who was, and he's still a brilliant actor, famous in the UK for playing the part of Benny in Crossroads. I wanted him in it. John Adams is a brilliant director who started the Payne's Plough new writing theatre company, ran Birmingham Repertory Theatre, Bolton Octagon, Basingstoke. I mean, he got Kenneth Branagh and Renaissance Theatre. He did their first season out of town. So a brilliant bloke and a nice chap as well. All this came together and I thought I would just document it. Oh, and the other thing is, it's a play for a man and a boy. That's kind of difficult. So I started to write a diary, had a few drinks on the very first night. And the reason I'm doing this now is that the very first night was the 1st of May, 1997. It was a very unusual time for me because we'd won these awards all of a sudden, having bashed away for sort of a few years in Birmingham without much recognition. There were still only really 2 of us full time, me and my ex-mate John Slater, who you'll find out about later. And so I did this diary, stream of consciousness, this diary, and the idea was we would release it on the first night of A Ghost of a Chance, and there'd be no editing, there'd be no going back again. And then fast forward 2015, it was the 21st anniversary of Maverick Theatre, which is remarkable and slightly frightening, I have to say. So we released it again, this book, and it's on Amazon now. It's called How to Make a Crisis Out of a Drama, I think. The Mava book, we talk about it locally, with a bit of additional material, and it's sold quite well. It's sold, I mean, not millions, it's sold sort of you know, probably thousands of copies around the world since 2015. So it is still available. It's also an audio book. But I thought what I'd do now, as a mate of mine is a writer and an author as well, who said I should be the product, which I don't particularly believe. But what I thought I might do, just because of these crazy lockdown times, is I'll read it to you, or at least some of it. And I'll do it in chapters. Some of the results, I have to say, there was no formal way of doing it. I just literally would come home, if I had time, I'd sit down at the computer. Bearing in mind, television wasn't all that good overnight in those days, after the pub, after the theatre had finished. So I'd sit down. Some of the entries are very, very short, some are much longer. But I thought I'll match day to day, and today in fact is the 1st of May, so I thought, or tomorrow is the 1st of May. So what I thought, the intro tonight, and then tomorrow I'll do the 1st of May. And for each entry, I will read what happens, how it happened to us. It does include some interesting things like, for instance, the death of Princess Diana, who I was writing and picked up on while I was writing my journal about these stories I'd heard that she had been in a crash and broken a leg. And anyway, there's quite a lot involved. There's also stuff that happened outside of a theatre company, so it's not really about making a theatre company, but it is. Anyway, take it or leave it. I just thought I'd kind of put it out there as a way of saying thank you. And also thank you if you've bought the printed copy or you've bought the audio book. Then I'm very grateful, because Maverick Theatre is a tiny charity. It's kept me very poor for very long. Get the little violin out. In these difficult times, of course, the London Literary Pub Crawl, which we started, which was out in central London every week, that's completely gone now. I'm trying to get a new thing called the People's Company going, which we did in Birmingham a few years ago. And I think I'll perhaps mention that at another time. But what I'll do now is, this is the intro from Ghost of a Chance from 2015. And you can leave comments below, because I think this is going to go on YouTube. Me and tech. Okay, thanks for listening anyway. And, you know, do let me know if you've got any comments. Chapter 1. In fact, it's not chapter 1, it's the introduction. Thank you so much for buying this small book. It'll make a big difference to the fortunes of the Maverick Theatre Company. It's odd how much, yet how little has changed since 1997. I would not have dreamed of trying to issue this diary again were it not for the accessibility of the internet and 3 things. 1, when we first published this at the Bilsey Pub in Birmingham in England in 1997, all the copies sold out. 2, in 1997, there were 2 people who heard about it from other sources and actively tried to purchase a copy. One person in Australia wanted a copy, whatever it cost, because his brother had told him about it and he'd heard about Maverick Theatre and he knew the area. 3, John Slater, who you will meet later in this tome, ever the dour exterior and my constant friend, foil and sounding board during the Bilsey Pub Theatre years, thought it had a value and was a good enough read. So here we are. 2015 sees an incredible 21 years since Maverick was officially launched, and that's why it was suggested we republish this book with additional comments and anecdotes from others who were touched by Maverick. Thanks to those who did. For no fee, of course. Poverty plays quite a big part in this whole story. So let's get going then. Introduction 2. To begin at the beginning, I never dreamed of being famous or winning an Oscar. I have actually won a few awards, but they were mostly by accident. And indeed, one of the main reasons for starting the Maverick Theatre Company, and therefore why you are kindly reading this now, was because nobody on our council estate housing project seemed to be able to do anything other than follow their dads into the factory. But to quote the great John Lennon, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. If you have a creative itch, you either ignore it, be uncomfortable, and then bury it for your whole life, or give it a good scratch and enjoy the short-term relief. I was fortunate enough to be given a chance to do that, and this is why we're here now. And I have to say, it might make for a tough, impoverished life, but it's never been boring. This journal is something of a hybrid offering. It's not about how to start a theatre company, how to work with actors, how to realise a dream, how to cope with tragedy, how to deal with poverty and abuse. Yet it is also about all these things. And it's a memoir, but not really. But I wanted something to celebrate what is, in a small way, a milestone. Maverick Theatre Company's 21 years. And like the 21 years of Maverick, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. I'd like to thank you for bothering with us. By buying this, you're helping to reduce our £5 overdraft and thereby ensuring our journey can continue. So thank you all, loves. 3. We're riding along on the crest of a wave. This whole Maverick Theatre thing started when Lord Baden-Powell took a bunch of kids to Brownsea Island over a century ago. When I was 7 years old, I was desperate to join the Cub Scouts. My adored older brother had been a leader for years. I couldn't wait. At 12, I went up to Sea Scouts. My enthusiasm for all things scouting was fading slightly as my teenage hormones took over. But as a bit of a duty, I dragged my adolescent derriere along to the now tolerated older brother's latest scheme, the Birmingham County Scouts Gang Show. Yes, this was something of an early game changer. It was a fairly transforming experience, mainly due to its epic scale. The idea of a bunch of scouts and a gang show conjures up pictures of church halls, but this was no It Ain't Half Hot Mum rinky-dink piano in the local village hall. Hell no. This was heads of ITV children's television drama and BAFTA-winning floor managers and musical directors and full 20-piece orchestras at one of the biggest theatres in Europe, the Birmingham Hippodrome. We ran for a week and regularly sold out all 2,000 seats every night. It wasn't, however, a case of me being starstruck and deciding to pursue a career as an actor. Far from it. Although my voice actually broke on stage at the Birmingham Hippodrome, singing a solo chorus of Around the Marble Arch, the musical director thought it was hilarious, which helped calm my terror. Although every time I'm around the Marble Arch nowadays in London, I still squeak on occasions. But what this exercise proved to me was that you could achieve greatness simply through effort, or at least theatrical success, or at least a great experience. Council estate housing project kids don't perform at huge major theatres like the Hippodrome, but they do, thanks to Lord Baden-Powell, the Scouts Association, and my big bro. And I had. Many years later, in 1991, having worked in radio for some time, I thought I should try a new direction. Working for a radio station is notoriously unreliable, particularly if you're a DJ, a bit like being on a football team. Now, I was DJing at nightclubs, but that was something of a young man's game too. I tried an office job when I left school and lasted 3 weeks. I can't mention where. They were such nice people. I told them I was emigrating to Canada. So I thought I'd try and turn a hobby into a full-time job and try professional theatre. I sat down and I decided to watch Kenneth Branagh's film version of Shakespeare's Henry V on BBC Two. I'd briefly done Shakespeare at college and I'd not really got it, so my expectations were low. But the boy Billy S was another Midlander from Stratford-upon-Avon, 25 miles south of Brum, and he'd done a bit, so I thought I'd give it a last shot. And I'm glad I did. The combination of Kenneth Branagh's verse speaking and direction with Patrick Doyle's stirring music hit a nerve. Bits of the play I hadn't got, but parts were thrilling. So thrilling, I thought there might be a way of presenting the play in a manner that would illuminate the difficult bits, but keep the thrills. So I set about rewriting Shakespeare's original, excuse me, and creating a version I hoped would bring out the best of the story and emotion without losing too much or patronising an audience. There were certain rules I felt I had to keep to rewriting Shakespeare. The greatest hits absolutely had to stay. But I also noticed reading the play that Shakespeare often tells you something and then tells you again. He has one of his main characters, Chorus, as a storyteller. Shakespeare apologises for containing a tale of mighty kings inside a little theatre, the Wooden O. It all felt remarkably contemporary. So I decided I'd take Shakespeare's philosophy a bit further and rewrite Chorus as a more modern day character, but try and keep the original metre where possible. I was less than sure that it would work, but I came home one night from the pub and thought, bugger it. I wrote the first page and staggered off to bed. At that time, I had a mate who was lodging with me, Keith Watkins his name. He was a drama teacher. When he saw the first page on the still opened word processor, oh, anyone remember the Amstrad PCW? No hard drive, 3-inch floppy disks and a black and white display, but it rocked my world. Thank you, Sir Alan Sugar. So Keith read my fledgling script and thought it was rather good, and he was a drama teacher, so that was enough for me. So I began a nightly ritual tapping away after everyone had gone to bed with a crumpled penguin version of Shakespeare's original play and referencing Olivier and Branagh's films and various BBC video recordings on a PCW. Very high tech for 1991, I can tell you. Eventually, it was done. I had a script that gave Chorus a modern character, and I tried to keep his modern dialogue in iambic pentameter, and it nearly worked. I thought I could do it myself and maybe earn the odd £50 a night when the radio and disco work dried up. The actor, me, would play 12 characters and all the Shakespeare greatest hits were in there. Sorted. I knew music was going to be important, and on the first draft it called for the show to open with Just an Illusion by the band Imagination. Spot on, I thought. Funky, contemporary and appropriate. And when I spoke to a friend I knew from Amdram, Trish Malone, Trish was, and still is a great person, although occasionally a bit scatty. I'm sure she won't mind me saying that. She always had a passion for theatre and performance, and we had similar working class backgrounds. She acted in a musical I directed, Words of Gummidge, co-written by Keith Waterhouse. It caused something of a stir on the first night when she came dancing on stage in Act 1, having forgotten to put on her dress. She hadn't noticed. The audience thought it was just alternative costuming, but the other cast members spent a whole dance number with smiles that were not just for creative effect. Trish eventually worked at the BBC in Birmingham, and in the best tradition of that noble organisation, worked her way up through the drama department. After a very successful time working with films at the Beeb, she went to South Africa a few years ago and has just had her first feature film made. We miss her, but we still keep in touch. Trish's boyfriend at the time was Robbie Williams, a talented, gentle soul who is still one of the finest illustrators I've ever come across. He's a genius. Trish suggested I get him involved, not just for a poster for the show, but to compose a score. He'd been in various bands and had more keyboards than Rick Wakeman. So I asked Rob to have a stab, and he took my distinctly unmusical references. Make this sound a bit like Land of Hope and Glory, but with mud. Much dirtier. Oh, and perhaps a bit of blood in there as well. And he created an original soundtrack. I also realised I would need someone to read the script so that I could hear it, read it out loud, and it would be best if that someone was an actor. Now, I knew quite a few good actors from my Amdram days at Hall Green Little Theatre in Birmingham, but I didn't know any professional actors. One actor from Hall Green in particular, though, Rob Stanson, had caught my eye because he'd taken the plunge and gone to drama school for a year. When he'd come back, he'd lost his Midlands accent, and this obviously marked him out. So I bought him a pint, the usual fee, and asked if he could come to my place for a read-through of the new script. We sat in my living room of my house in Highbury Road, Kings Heath, and Rob started reading Chorus, my everyman's opening speech. Well, by the time Henry V arrived in Harfleur, Rob was on his feet and pacing across the room. And by the time we got to the Battle of Agincourt, I'd moved the settee and the two chairs into the hall. He was flinging himself across the room, fighting the battle. I fairly quickly realised that Rob would do a much better job than I could, and that his talents, coupled with his professional actor training, would give him the stamina needed to pull off what was proving to be quite a demanding role. Some years later, I should say, I did eventually perform the show myself at the cavernous 900-seater Birmingham Repertory Theatre. It was a charity night, and it was also a good job it was only one performance as a fundraiser. I'd lost my voice and nearly 4 pounds in weight by the end. But back to 1992. It was time to show the world, although I had nowhere to perform and no set, props or costume, but I had an actor, cost me another pint, and a composer, make that 2 pints, so how hard could the other stuff be? The obvious place to find out about Shakespeare if you live in Birmingham is the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-upon-Avon, just down the road. So I phoned them and we managed to find a perfect throne. Made of wood, it was non-specific and sturdy, and it needed to be, because I wanted everything as much as possible to be in chaos by the end of the performance, and realised one way to do this would be for the actor to throw down the throne in time with an explosion. Oh yes, I wanted explosions. Oh, and arrows, whooshing arrows, and smoke, lots of smoke. Oh, and bird song, yeah. And the sound of 1,000 men in battle, and blood, and lights that would blind the audience when the arrows went off. Perhaps bizarrely, the only thing I didn't really get on that list was the bird song. As well as composing the score, Rob was in charge of the technical effects and did a great job, although I think he decided to quietly drop the bird song effect. Don't forget, we were playing all these effects off cassette tapes. He hoped I wouldn't notice. I did actually notice, but sometimes you've got to play the team game. Henry is still a hugely technical show. And then there were the arrow sound effects. I hunted high and low for something that sounded like thousands of arrows being released by the English bowmen into the heart of the French charge. It was a crucial effect and I built both dialogue and action around them. Now, this was pre-Internet 1992, so I spent days in libraries and talking to radio chums, listening to sound effects records. I wanted something that sounded like in the films I'd seen. Eventually it dawned on me that I was getting nowhere, and there was only one person I knew who could help me for sure. So I went back to Ken Branagh's film, checked out the credits, and after many phone calls, I managed to track down Campbell Askew, the film's sound editor. I was a bit nervous approaching his film talent out of the blue. I eventually found him at Pinewood Film Studios. He was in an edit. I almost bowed when he answered the phone. I explained my problem and asked if there was any advice or help he could offer. Ah, yes, the arrows. Where did you get the effects from, if you don't mind me asking, please? I resisted the temptation to call him sir. Ah, I made the arrows myself. Oh, this could be difficult. Would you mind very much if I asked you how you made them, please? Because they sounded great. Maybe I could try and replicate what you did. Campbell Askew laughed. I wouldn't wish that on you. Recording those sounds involved whirring inner tubes, shouting into Wellington boots, banging kettles, that sort of thing. Very difficult to get right. Oh, I could see my key effects going the way of the Birds song. But Campbell must have heard my disappointment. Look, I tell you what, he said. You can use my effects. I'm sure nobody would mind at Renaissance. Give me your address and I'll send you a clean feed. Wasn't that nice? I was and remain to this day hugely grateful to Campbell for his generosity. It was an early lesson in how this tough old business is peopled by some truly generous and giving people. It meant the show could move forward. I hope to meet Campbell Askew one day. I've drunk his health many times in Edinburgh, on tour and in the USA. I'm sure he will have forgotten us, but I will never forget him and his small act of kindness. So, thanks to Campbell Askew, I had the major sound effect. However, I still had no set to play the effects on. How was this going to happen? I'll stop now because it's 22 minutes. But more tomorrow, if you fancy. If you could leave a little arrow thingy, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll stop. In the meantime, stay safe. God bless you.